As I was writing this, Trump's second impeachment has already been processed. And with Mitch McConnell condemning what Trump had said at his last rally, this only puts Trump in more jeopardy. And with tensions as high as ever, there's a lot to cover ever since Biden was confirmed president-elect. After that crazy insurrection, our country has shown weakness and shows how easily people are manipulated, both through social media and through a ruthless dictator who couldn't get it out of his head that this election was fraudulent. Trump's been known to be a compulsive liar, be it for the pettiest of things. And despite having all his court cases thrown out for election fraud, to this day, he still states that he won big cases on a fraudulent election. More than 60 of them, for sure. Right now, I'm not trying to convince any conservatives that Trump is a fraud, a liar, and a narcissist. He doesn't care that 4 of his supporters have died and the police officer, let alone 400,000 Americans. Not once did he mention any of their names. Instead, he stuck to the same tactics of justifying what he did and saying that his speech was appropriate. Mind you, a speech that inspired these people to commit a seditious act. These are the actions of our country's most ignorant and privileged. To think that there are people that can walk into our Capitol building and try to force the hand of our politicians to overturn the election towards Trump, solely based off the rantings of a deranged dictator high off his ass from tanning spray, is just beyond my understanding. There's just no way that these terrorists can escape without any consequence. One guy even had a cooler full of Molotov cocktails. Pipe bombs were found at the Capitol.
As the crowd pushed up, one man flashed his handgun at a group of journalists.
And of all things, there was even a pitchfork out there. Pitchforks!
Well, a pitchfork is it's just an iconic representation of what people over time have done in this country.
It feels more like a weapon, to be quite honest.
No, it's not. It's farm equipment, and it's legal in this city.
Yeah, are you farming today?
It's an icon. It's a representation.
Maybe Trump should have changed his motto to make America farm again. What I don't seem to understand, though, with all these people self-incriminating themselves, with all the footage of them live streaming this attack on our Capitol, how one judge thought that one guy in particular had nothing to do with the rest of the Capitol riot. So Larry Rendell Brock Jr., the one seen around the Capitol carrying zip tie handcuffs, decked out in armor, didn't seem to have bad intentions, according to one judge. Despite the FBI warning saying that he's dangerous and could commit more violence. And you want to know why the judge released him? Because he said that this guy had a long and distinguished military career. I think that long and distinguished career ended after he committed sedition. But you know what? Latin Americans are allowed to serve in the military. But when they retire, they would be happily deported to outside of the country. But if you're white and you commit a crime, you get a slap on the wrist just for serving your country dutifully. But if you're an immigrant, you don't matter and you're disposable.
My name's Alex Murillo, U.S. Navy veteran. I was in the Navy from 1996 to 2000. Joined the military right out of high school. Wanted a chance to go to college and also had plans of having a career in law enforcement. I wanted to serve my country and make my family proud. Cuando me estaba terminando mi enlistment, my marriage was also breaking up. So just started living my life as best I could. I drove a truck and I was arrested in that truck, and that truck had marijuana in it. I ended up doing casi 3 años en la federal. Iba a tomar un programa de drogas y de drug awareness and intervention. Y iba a salir en año y medio, pero porque I had an immigration flag que salió, tuve que hacer todo el tiempo, no agarré the halfway house que iba a agarrar. Mis hijos me estaban esperando y nunca llegué. Instead, I ended up here in Mexico.
Even 3 GOP senators were ousted by a Trump supporter, saying that he was funded by them. Even off-duty police officers were caught at this riot.
I received information from an individual that one of my officers might have been in D.C. for the protest. Let me just say this, there is no excuse for criminal activity, especially from a police officer. I can't tell you the anger I feel at the thought of a police officer and other police officers thinking they get to go storm the Capitol.
Now, how could anyone consider themselves a legitimate police officer, supposedly someone who upholds the law, especially after being found in the fucking Capitol building? This rabid group of cultists were yelling out treason! Treason! An election was held and one candidate won. The other one cried foul, mind you, without any evidence to prove his accusations. He riled up a crowd to the point where they committed an attack on our Capitol to overturn an election. And as a result, 5 people died. 2 afterwards from suicide. 1 Trump supporter, 1 police officer. Then he goes on to say that every single word from his rally was appropriate. He's no priest. He didn't give some sort of speech at some sermon. What he did was inciting violence. And Rudy Giuliani did as well.
Let's have trial by combat.
Stand up and fight. Stand up and hold your representatives accountable.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength.
Even Steve Bannon long ago had mentioned that it would take putting heads on pikes to serve as an example.
I'd actually like to go back to the old times of Tudor England. I'd put the heads on pikes, right? I'd put them at the 2 corners of the White House as a warning to federal bureaucrats. You either get with the program or you're gone.
And that wasn't meant metaphorically, because he never went on ahead and corrected himself. And just a day before Biden is inaugurated, Trump decides to pardon Steve Bannon from charges of fraud from stealing from his own supporters. What a disgusting president. What a disgusting inner circle that he kept around him. And what a disgusting administration that he ran. During his entire 2016 campaign, he ran on draining the swamp. Well, it's finally getting drained tomorrow as the Biden administration finally flushes out that fucking orange hot turd out of the White House. I'm glad Trump didn't pardon himself or have Pence do it for him. And I'm glad he's too proud to have Biden pardon him too. There's no lawyer good enough to defend Trump from the sedition he committed. Many of Trump's supporters were caught on film saying that it was Trump who sent them there. They were there following orders from Trump. And what exactly were they doing at the Capitol building again? What was their intentions? To drag them out and tickle them? Like shoo them out of the Capitol building? Give them a little finger wag and a stern talking to? Fuck that! They were there to hurt somebody. They were looking for Nancy Pelosi and even Mike Pence.
Where the fuck are they? Where are they? While we're here, we might as well set up a government. Hey, let's take a seat, people! Let's take a seat! Nancy Pelosi. Let's vote on some shit!
They blame Mike Pence equally as much as every Democrat out there for acknowledging Biden was president-elect. Now Mitch McConnell is admitting that what Trump said at that rally is the very reason why that attack happened at the Capitol. People continuously being fed lies and fear-mongered into believing that a Biden presidency will result in their rights being revoked or something. I know how Trump's impeachment trial should go, but who's to say he won't try to leave the country and go to his best friend, Putin? I would like to say that this nightmare is finally coming to an end, but there's so much to do before then. First, we got to make sure that these COVID-19 tests and vaccines are readily available to everybody for next to nothing. Second, a relief fund and an extended unemployment benefit should be provided to everybody still out of work. It might even be necessary to provide support for a lot longer than we expect, because a lot of these jobs and businesses were permanently eliminated because of this pandemic. And lastly, police reform should be on one of those things on Biden's agenda now, especially after those riots. It showed how many cops supported this insurrection. They say they uphold the law, but they're openly breaking it. And they're a part of a bigger group that got a cop killed. And cops have said this in many cases that they've handled before. where you're guilty by association. Why should that same phrase not apply to them? Also, thanks to Parler, the one app that far-right groups were flocking to, their GPS locations are being handed over to the FBI so they can be caught. I'm telling you, I couldn't have picked a worse time to start podcasting about politics. I just wanted to be a modest streamer and podcaster talking about art, dogs, and stuff that I just find interesting, and maybe the occasional trending topic, including politics. I just can't seem to catch up with the shitstorm that Trump kicked up in the past 6 months. He left some pretty deep scars, but I think we'll recover, even if it takes more than a second Biden term. And no, I don't mean a third Biden term. What do I look like? A hillbilly Trump supporter? I'm not that stupid. I would like to hear what many of you have to say, what you expect in the coming years, maybe just how your day went. Thank you again for sticking around this long. If you would like to hear more, subscribe, hit that bell to get notifications about when another episode has gone up. And you've been listening to the Axel Does podcast. Let's go do something. If you would like to hear more, subscribe, hit that bell to get notifications about when another episode has gone up. And you've been listening to the Axel Does podcast. Let's go do something.